recently I've noticed quite a few conservative commentators, obviously not all conservatives, have been attacking libertarianism, particularly right-wing libertarians as well.
Took that personally.
I did, yeah.
That's fine.
And there are some false presumptions in there that they're making, and I wanted to correct some of the misconceptions, as well as just making some general points about political strategy, because believe it or not, if people consider you on side, it's not good to then say, by the way, you're my enemy, if you're pushing in the same direction, which I'm going to argue that at least some libertarians are, and they're being targeted unfairly in my opinion. But I am both a libertarian and I'm socially conservative, so I feel like I'm watching my parents fight and I'm kind of caught in the middle, like, no, I love you both. Please stop.
Just make friends and kiss.
But it's a valid point to make that alienating people that agree with you is not a good idea. Like, I agree for the most part with the majority of things that conservatives say.
But it's what harm are they going to do to your vision of the world? Not really any. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, we want the same things, yeah, but we just have a different idea of the best means to get there. So that's more of a logistical thing than an ideological one necessarily. As if people have the same values as you, why are you getting mad at them? It doesn't make sense to me. But yes, both sides, friends, political allies, or at least they should be, but they are in my opinion. And I'm not going to be mean or anything like that. I'm not going to call people names, unlike some who probably deserve it. But I don't think that this is very constructive for politics in general, because you're going to push people away if you're being unreasonable and uncharitable and trying to paint people as holding opinions that they don't have. They're not going to want to ally with you politically, whereas otherwise you'd be pushing in the same direction. You're just going to alienate people, which is really common sense, and I'm annoyed that I have to say it, but apparently a bunch of conservatives in the United States have been hitting their heads against inanimate objects to the point that they're drooling from the mouth and have forgotten a very...
No insulting quotes, no?
I didn't last very long, did I?
No.
I take that back. I didn't mean it, really.
I love you, Mummy and Daddy.
I'm not picking sides. But yes, here we have just an example from Cernovich, and I picked Cernovich because I actually agree with him a lot of the time on a lot of things, so I'm not picking on him specifically, but I'm not going to show you all of the different iterations from prominent commentators because it's much of the same boring thing, and you don't need that hammered home, but just need to know that, yes, I've seen lots of it, and it's been getting on my nerves. And he says, given the choice, libertarians will always side with the communists. They are fundamentally a left-wing movement. So what do you make of that, Callum?
No, I don't think they do.
Thank you.
I mean, like, the ones who were fighting against the Soviet Union from the inside certainly weren't happy.
Yeah, but I think I don't have you in mind when I'm talking about this sort of thing, because you're pretty good at knowing that there is nuance in stuff. Like, you don't just say, oh yeah, by the way, everyone who subscribes to this political position, they think exactly the same thing.
Also, the world's a big place.
Mm-hmm.
I've been very anti-American, trying to calm it down. But there's mostly the left-wing Americans is as a position that, like, the world is just the United States political divide, which is why they go to Afghanistan and are like, so who's the freedom fighters? And it's like, oh, come on, like, there are no freedom fighters here, man. So yeah,
And as Spike Cohen points out here in this next one, libertarianism is the opposite of communism. I mean, who'd have thought that a very authoritarian belief is the polar opposite of one that values liberty and freedom?
I mean, that's why was the libertarian socialist just such a joke?
I know, it's like a juxtaposition of terms. I don't really understand how they reconcile the two things, because socialism, of course, high state intervention, but libertarianism, low state intervention. So these two things do not work together.
They're like so-called left libertarian. They're either liars or children.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you get. I think. I don't know. I might be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure Vosh has said, like, he's a libertarian leftist, and it's just.
I know that
you can tell he's lying because he knows where this goes. And she's like, no, you are going to force people to comply.
Yes.
And you're not going to do that by argumentation.
Mm-hmm. I know that Noam Chomsky describes himself as a libertarian socialist, but he just likes to rag on the United States. But he goes on to say, conservative politicians have helped progressives build the bloated, tyrannical, indebted spy state we live in.
Noam Chomsky, I'm a libertarian. Also, you threaten the Yugoslavian state. Time to die.
But this point here is more of the political strategy thing, isn't it? Because conservatives typically want to use the state to own the leftists, right? Or control them or keep them from harming normal people, which, I mean, the ends I can certainly understand, but I just don't think the means of doing it, using the state, is the right way to go about it, because then it's like creating the gallows which the left are then going to hang you with. That's the way I see it.
It depends on the circumstance.
It does, yeah.
So I mean,
I'm
like,
generalising,
you know, killing your opponents. But saying maybe this blue-haired freak who wants to tell your kids about all the anal sex they've been up to and their friends, yeah, maybe shouldn't work in the school. And we're going to kick them out of the school board.
Of course, there are caveats. Like, I think there is a place for the government to protect the rights of children from abuse, because their children, believe it or not, are not adults, and they don't have the same mind as an adult, and therefore they don't know what's good for them and how to deal with a situation that an adult could deal with constructively, and therefore they must be protected, which is a pretty common view.
Yeah, but you do see occasionally libertarians who are like, oh, we can't do anything about the leftists in schools. It's like, no, you really can. Otherwise,
yeah, and I hate those people.
Those kids don't have liberty, for one.
Yeah, those people, I reject any association with them.
Yeah.
But this argument has been around for quite a while. Here we have Reason magazine. Libertarians are the new communists and anti-libertarians are out of ideas.
I do not like Reason.
Nor do I. Reason the magazine, not Reason the metaphysical concept.
No, I don't like... All right, yeah, sorry.
It's also worth mentioning as well that recently me and Harry did an episode of Contemplations, which is my series, talking about libertarianism, where we talked about all of the different varieties of libertarianism, there are many, and evaluating some of their ideas, and the ones we like, the ones we dislike. And Harry is like the Anakin Skywalker. He used to be like my libertarian apprentice, and he betrayed me and turned to the dark side.
I think he's a Singaporean nationalist now.
No, of course I'm being silly. But yes, I think it was a really good video where we talked about all of the different things and what we agree with, disagree with, and it's good at getting the nuances and the divisions within libertarianism, which seemingly people don't seem to get. That yes, actually there are people who just want a smaller state but agree with everything the conservatives are saying, like me. And I find it frustrating to be lumped in with like the ones that are just like, yeah, by the way, stopping me diddling kids is violating my non-aggression principle. Those people belong underneath the prison, right? I don't want any association with them. They're very, very distinct from other people, but I mean, criticising them, perfectly fair. So it's also worth mentioning as well that libertarians sometimes have an open border policy because of the economics, free market, that sort of thing. People like Adam Smith advocated for it. However...
Fucking loons.
Yes.
Sorry to swear, but they're actually mental people.
I disagree with that, obviously. Yeah. I think that, yes, you need to control your borders. It's obvious to do that. And there are like chapters of the Libertarian Party, as well as, this is New Hampshire, for example. They're quite often very good. Also, the Mises Caucus of the Libertarian Party is great. And
so correct me if I'm wrong, because I ain't in these circles like you are, but my understanding is in the United States, the Libertarian Party is divided between like the Mises guys and then the left-wing retards.
Yes, and this is actually an important point, because obviously on the more statist side of American politics, you have the Democrats and the Republicans. You got the right and left. And then in the middle, not really in the middle politically in a political compass sense, but you have the Libertarians who are just one party. So they've got both left and right, whereas on the more state-oriented side, obviously you've got Democrats and Republicans. Right. They're separated, whereas the poor right-wing libertarians have to suffer left-wingers, and there are attempts to purge them out, but it's very difficult when you don't like using...
honestly incoherent to even listen to. I mean, if someone comes to you, I don't know how radical this is, but the idea of libertarianism to me just seems like an ethnic ideology of like Anglo-Saxons or something. Like,
Wait, what?
When you go to the Russians, you start talking about libertarianism, and it's like, yeah, no, good luck, but you ain't never getting this. like, no matter what happens. Like,
well, I'm not optimistic. I mean, this is just like, this is the world I want to live in. I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime. Yeah,
but I can't get over those people who are like, what if we just massively ethnically change the United States and we'll still have the same values of liberty and justice? It's just like, you're a fucking crack smoker. Like, you have to keep the borders and the ethnic homogeneity to have this privilege you have of being able to have some liberal worldview that in the good way, you know, you can still own guns and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I find that sometimes people approach politics like it's like a football team, just like I'm red, therefore I agree with everything red do. I don't know why they speak like a caveman. That's a bit uncharitable, but
I'm not going to insult anyone.
that person doesn't exist. They're hypothetical.
Okay, right.
But,
so it's your little straw man.
yes, it is. But obviously there are things that you can disagree with that with your compatriots that you can still agree with the majority of what they're saying, but there are still aspects of it that you don't have to agree with, right? Like, for example, I don't agree with lots of other libertarians about certain things. For example, I'm not necessarily as anti-war as many other libertarians. I like a good scrap does me. You're looking at me very strangely. What?
I don't know. I think you enjoyed looking at wars, not taking part in them.
Well, that's true, yeah. Important caveat. I like spectating from a very far distance. But yes, of course, the obvious thing to rebut the Cernovich thing is that integral to libertarianism is individualism. In any form of libertarianism, you don't really have collective libertarianism. Collectivism is inherent to communism. These are two antagonistic forces that do not go together well. It doesn't make sense to put them together, which is why libertarian socialism is silly and doesn't make any sense.
But this is also my ethnic point. Like, if you've got massive ethnic diversity within loads of different groups that see themselves as more fundamental than the ideology, then yeah, you ain't going to have libertarianism because you're going to be fighting all the time on ethnic lines.
Yes.
And whereas that's my point about, like, you need some things in place so that you're not divided already, and then you can start thinking about the ideal state and blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
Like,
you can't be at each other's throats, yeah.
My point.
So I have also heard conservatives argue against individualism, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's important. And they claim that it breaks up communities, but I think that this is a bit of a misunderstanding of what individualism actually is. And surprisingly, the Oxford Dictionary definition is actually quite good. So it says, a social theory favouring freedom of action for individuals over collective or state control. So you're an individualist if you don't like other people making you do stuff or the state making you do stuff. It's that simple. It's not that you reject a community entirely, or because, of course, being social is inherent to being a human being, isn't it? I mean, no one's denying that.
Someone's got to deal with the drag queen story hour still.
That's true,
Even if it's not the state. It's got to be you guys getting together and being like, no, we don't do that. Get out of town.
It's also worth mentioning as well, of course, that libertarians are typically the most stringent supporters of property rights, which, of course, seems like the right are the only ones that actually support these now. Gun rights as well, and your right to use those guns in self-defense. I mean, this is something that has become a very right-wing issue, hasn't it? Because the left are just like, no, guns bad, guns kill people. It's like, no, people kill people.
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is part of the incoherence of some of the Republicans. When you hear them talk about the right to bear arms because you need to rise up against like oppressive government, and then they'll turn around and be like, by the way, I'm strengthening the FBI and the NSA. You're like, ha! You're like, you know they literally oppress conservatives. That's the whole... We've seen who works there, man.
It's like
you could be forgiven if we were in the Bush era, but no, like they literally go after Trump.
It's like tipping your executioner, isn't it? It's like, here you go, buy yourself something nice. But it's silly. The most charitable interpretation of this view I could think of is that some libertarians, myself included, are cynical about the war on drugs, and I think it's failed, and perhaps a new approach should be taken, and leftists do say that as well. But that's one of the few things that I do agree with the left on. But, you know, the exception does not make the rule, does it? I don't think. But yes. And I wanted to move on to some of the bad stuff because I've been a bit more critical than I wanted to be. But here's the Libertarian Party of Texas talking about Garrett Foster, who's the guy in Texas, I think, who pointed the AK-47 at people and then he got shot. But he was protesting alongside Black Lives Matter, which I don't think anyone should do ever, under any circumstances, because they're reprehensible people protesting something that is absurd. But
the question was more, did this guy threaten the guy? So he got shot. Did he threaten the man's life before he got shot? If no, then he was a murderer. And if yes, well, then self-defense.
Harry told me, because he dug into this, that he'd actually been cautioned by the police before this happened for pointing his rifle at people and saying, no, don't do that. Which I don't know why he wouldn't have been...
But did he do it in this instance? The important.
Yeah, but supposedly the crowd of people came up to the car of the guy who shot him and were admitted to kicking it and shaking it. And it seemed like the guy was being threatened because he's surrounded by armed people attacking his vehicle, right?
Well, the question was, did he raise the gun? The guy who shot him said, yeah, he rose it towards me, in which case, boom. And then that's self-defense. If he didn't, then you've shot someone for holding a rifle, which is not a crime.
So I would argue that the circumstances of the thing meant that it is more than likely self-defense. So they shouldn't be saying his passing is a tragic loss. He'll always be remembered for his dedication to volunteering activism and stuff like that. And he's saying to they're saying to Greg Abbott, don't make this worse, because he wants to pardon the person who was involved here. And as pointed out in this next one here, with Clint Russell, who I've spoke to before, he says, yeah, sure, it's a loss, but the conviction of Mr. Perry is also a grave injustice because approaching innocent people in their vehicles with a mob in tow and blocking traffic while rifle ready is a definitional F around and find out. So yeah, there are obviously divisions. I know he's a libertarian and he's replying to the Libertarian Party of Texas. It's complicated. That's politics, isn't it? And of course, Harry did cover this if you wanted to know a bit more about that case, but I'm just using this as an example to say, yes, opinions vary. Shock, I know. But I've also seen some things from liberals as well, like Konstantin Kisin. And here he says, libertarianism is a great political philosophy for teenagers. Thankfully, most of us have the good sense to grow out of it and become adults.
Yeah, he's also Russian.
Yes, the state is inevitable.
No, but it isn't happening there. It's like, I imagine his also view.
But I find the notion that getting greater personal responsibility and the state making less decisions for you makes you more of a child. It's a bit strange because being an adult is being responsible for yourself and making your own decisions.
To be fair, some context here, it's probably Constantine arguing with people endlessly about...
He is arguing with libertarians.
Foreign policy. And usually the libertarian position is, I don't care. So, well, that's not Constantine, so...
Yeah, I just think that this is really unproductive, though, obviously. Calling people teenagers for their beliefs whilst behaving like a child, just saying, well, I'm an adult and you're a child, therefore me right.
You would never do that.
Yeah. I didn't just do that, did I? I'm not a hypocrite in any way. But yes, what I wanted to end on is this rather amazing, and I'm not understating it. This is written by Murray Rothbard, of course, prominent libertarian, right-wing libertarian. He's not a frog, I swear. That's what you call French libertarians, is libertarians.
Stop making our frogs gay.
But yes, he wrote this all the way back in 1992, and it's just he's titled it. I can't stop laughing now.
I've just got a Gadsden flag with a frog on it. It just says, don't gay on me. Like,
it's titled A Right-Wing Populist Programme, and it says, a right-wing populist programme must concentrate on dismantling the crucial existing areas of the state and elite rule, and on liberating the average American from the most flagrant and oppressive features of that rule, in short. And by the way, this is one of the most based documents ever written. It says, slash taxes, all taxes, sales, business, property, etc., but especially the most oppressive politically and personally, the income tax. We must work towards repeal of the income tax and abolish the IRS. Already off to a great start, in my opinion. Obviously, I'm a bit biased.
You've got to cut the spending too.
Yeah, of course.
I know he will.
He's getting onto that. Slash welfare. There we go, right after. Get rid of underclass rule by abolishing the welfare system, or, short of abolition, severely cutting and restricting it. I mean, yes, this is what I want. Abolish racial or group privileges, abolish affirmative action, set aside racial quotas, and point out that the root of such quotas is the entire civil rights structure which tramples on property rights of every American. the base
Sorry, I
levels
read the next
elevating.
one and the meme came to mind. Crush criminals, round cap. No, I can't.
Take back the streets, crush criminals. And by this I mean, of course, not white-collar criminals or insider traders, but violent street criminals, robbers, muggers, rapists, murderers. Cops must be unleashed and allowed to administer instant punishment, subject, of course, to liability when they are in error. I mean, I feel like he got a little bit carried away there and just like, maybe I should track that.
No, he's entirely right. I mean, if you actually
Yeah,
want to solve the problems on the streets, you really need to remove the criminals.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a couple of ways of doing that. I mean, the American one is literally just to lock them up forever and then just have a huge budget for prisons because you have 1 billion people there. I mean, it's kind of funny, actually, when you see people criticizing mass incarceration in the US. And it's just like, it's literally all the murderers and rapists. It's just the United States actually does enforce the law of giving them a huge sentence. In the UK, we don't. We let them off.
So, you'll be all right. You won't murder again. Oh, wait. Oh, you have. Oh, never mind.
Yeah. They do take a bit too far occasionally. Where you get like a 7-year-old who's in there. He's been there doing 20 years for murder. It's like, bro, I don't...
How do you even kill someone at 7? I don't understand.
Sure, but I remember FPS Russia was talking about there was some guy in there for 30 years when he was in prison. I know he was in there for murder or something, and now he's an old man. It's like, maybe he'll murder someone, but probably not. I mean, really?
I'm not going to shed a tear for murderers, to be fair.
I don't know, man. When you're in there... Like, if he's 50, yeah, keep him in. He's still, done the crime, give him the time. But when he's on the point of like 60, 70...
When he can't even raise his walking stick above his hip, I think he's not going to kill someone.
It's more like a concentration camp guard, where it's like, are we really running the trial still? I think we established genocide was bad, but I mean, this dude, he ain't doing another one.
So, another one, take back the streets. This is part 2. Get rid of the bums. Again, unleash the cops to clear the streets of bums and vagrants. Where will they go? Who cares? Hopefully they will disappear. That is, move from the ranks of the petted and cosseted bum class to the ranks of productive members of society. I'm sorry, but I don't think I've ever seen a paragraph that's been so based before.
He's right. I mean, like the Taliban dealing with the drug gangs. That's actually how you deal with them. Sorry.
I mean, it works. And it says, abolish the Fed, attack the banksters. Money and banking are recondite issues, but the realities can be made vivid. The Fed is an organised cartel of banksters who are creating inflation, ripping off the public, destroying the savings of average Americans. The hundreds of billions of taxpayer handouts to S&L banksters will be chicken feed compared to the coming collapse of the commercial banks. He said this in 1992. That didn't age too well, although...
But I thought
we never know.
Aged incredibly well. Like,
you reckon?
What, 2008 comes?
Oh, yeah, I suppose so. It wasn't a complete collapse, I suppose. I'm being uncharitable to someone I agree with for some reason.
Bearsteins or whatever went bankrupt. And then everyone else got bailed out. So
I mean, that is true, yeah. America first. A key point and not meant to be seventh in priority, the American economy is not only in recession at the time, and probably now, it is in stagnation. The average family is worse off now than it was 2 decades ago. That trend has continued. Come home, America. Stop supporting bums abroad. Stop all foreign aid, which is aid to banksters and their bonds and their export industries. Stop globaloney and let's solve our problems at home. I mean, where is he going wrong here? And finally, defend family values, which means get the state out of the family and replace state control with parental control. In the long run, this means ending public schools and replacing them with private schools. But we must realise that vouchers and even tax credit schemes are not, despite Milton Friedman, transitional demands on the path to privatised education. Instead, they will make matters worse by fastening government control more totally upon private schools within the sound alternative is decentralisation and back to local community neighbourhood control of schools. I mean, this is basically the school choice debate that's playing out at the minute, isn't it? Extended even further. And again, incredibly based, in my opinion. So,
do you get the blue head freaks out of school? Well,
yes.
I mean, that would be it.
And then he goes on to actually talk about left libertarians with the healthy amount of scorn that is needed. He says, we must reject once and for all the left libertarian view that all government-operated resources must be cesspools. We must try, short of ultimate privatisation, to operate government facilities in a manner most conducive to a business or neighbourhood control. But that means that the public schools must allow prayer, and we must abandon the absurd left atheist interpretation of the First Amendment that establishes the establishment of religion, means not allowing prayers in public schools or a creche, in a schoolyard or a public square at Christmas. We must return to common sense and the original intent in constitutional interpretation. Oh, I don't know about you.
What happened there?
Just the whole thing. It's great, isn't it?
All right.
It's just hearing my worldview articulated so well.
Weird to see you so happy.
I know, it's a rare thing. But yes, is this really so deplorable? I mean, this is what, broadly speaking, many right-wing libertarians believe. So if you're a conservative, perhaps, give them a bit more charity and see them as the allies that they are. And the same goes for libertarians as well, and conservatives. They're not necessarily your enemies. You want the same ends. You have different ideas of the means of getting there, but you have the same values. You can be friends. You can be political allies. The idea is we're pushing in the same direction to shift the Overton window, so antagonistically arguing amongst each other isn't going to help that whatsoever. But if you've not been convinced by this, I do have a bit of suggested reading for you in this final link here. Here is a book that I would recommend. It's titled Everyone I Don't Like is a Communist, and if you're listening, it's got a picture of Joseph Stalin in his pyjamas riding a nice carpet with a rainbow, and it says A Child's Guide to Online Political Discussion. I feel like you'll really enjoy this book if you're not convinced.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the premium podcast, this episode on Is Jesus Christ a Socialist? If you'd like to find out what else has been put out, you can follow on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.